Stand up.
Okay, I am off. We are off. It is Wednesday, and it's the 10th of July, 2024 here in America or wherever you are listening. I'm very happy to have you here. David Cay Johnston joins me today for a wide-ranging conversation about the Supreme Court decisions, the presidential campaign, and so much more. Always great to have this Pulitzer Prize-winning journalists joining me. That is coming up at 21 minutes. I'm very happy to have you here listening. I hope things are all right with you. I hope to see you at our hangout tomorrow night, Thursday night, and wanted to make my friends in Nashville aware of Ophira Eisenberg will be there on the next Thursday, July 18th. I'm going to plug this for her as much as I can. Zany's Nashville, one night only. Go see Ophira at Zany's in Nashville. All right. Well, I don't have any other plugs other than the hangout and how much I love you. I should probably get to the headlines. There are 40 days until the Democratic National Convention, 117 days till Election Day, and you've got the RNC coming up in Milwaukee next week. It starts Monday, July 15th. So who's going to that, huh? Any day now we will know who the disgraced former president will be picking to disgrace, because whoever runs with him will also be a disgrace. Is it going to be Marco Rubio, Doug Burgum, or J.D. Vance? Those are the three names most people are throwing around, but maybe it'll be something else. I don't know. I don't care. That person's a terrible person. And last night, disgraced former president had a rally in Florida, and I'm not going to mention too much about it. If anything, I don't think I'm grabbing any sound bites from it. But let's get to those headlines and everything else that's happening in the world, around America, and everywhere else. Starting with the NATO summit, where the president delivered a strong speech touting NATO amid all these health questions. I'll bring you some of the clips for that, and you can decide what you think, but he's getting good marks for his speech yesterday at the NATO summit that they kicked off in Washington, D.C., where he gave the Presidential Medal of Honor to Jens Stoltenberg, of the former president of Norway, who now is the president of NATO. The Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, on Tuesday expressed concern that holding interest rates too high for too long could jeopardize economic growth. A federal judge in Alaska resigned on Monday after an investigation found that he had had inappropriate relationship with a law clerk and then lied about it, in addition to creating a hostile work environment that included graphic sexual remarks to colleagues. And guess who appointed this judge, Joshua Kindred? Donald Trump. What a shock. Five-term Republican senator from Oklahoma, James Inhofe, has died, and until President Donald J. Trump's arrival in 2017, arguably Washington's most prominent denier of the established science of human-generated climate change. He died at age 89, and apparently the cause of death was he was hit by a snowball. That's pretty ironic. No, I guess it was a stroke. He was 89 years old, and I have nothing to say about him because nobody in the U.S. Senate probably did more damage to climate legislation, to the public's interest in it, and nobody was probably more of a friend to natural gas and fossil fuel industry than James Inhofe. Several congressional Democrats have over the last few days raised grave fears about President Biden's ability to win re-election in November, writes the New York Times. When the party's House and Senate contingents emerged today from crucial meetings, neither group appeared willing to push Biden aside. The headline in that article, Democrats appeared unwilling to break with Biden. So we'll see what happens. It's day to day, but President Biden had a good day yesterday. In related news, black women, the Democratic Party's most loyal voting bloc, remain Biden's firewall of support, according to the Times. Interviews with nearly 24 black Democratic women, including many of the grassroots organizers credited as instrumental in Mr. Biden's victory 4 years ago, indicate that the vast majority of this loyal voting group is not yet prepared to abandon him or the Vice President Kamala Harris. Yesterday, the FTC, that's the Federal Trade Commission, criticized pharmacy benefit managers in a scathing report ramping up its scrutiny of the pharmaceutical industry, or pharmacies. Manhattan prosecutors said they're actively pursuing a fresh prosecution of Harvey Weinstein on sex crimes charges. The president of India, Narendra Modi, visited President Vladimir Putin of Russia, angering Ukraine. I saw a photo of them hugging. That's not great, but also unsurprising. Tropical storm Beryl left millions of our friends in Houston without power. In auto manufacturing news, Tesla's share of the electric vehicle market fell below 50% in the second quarter. And those are all the headlines that I've gathered for you from yesterday. Now let's get to the sound bites, the clips. Let's start with President Biden yesterday, kicking off the NATO summit. He sounded pretty good.
An overwhelming bipartisan majority of Americans understand that NATO makes us all safer. The fact that both Democratic and Republican parties are represented here today is a testament to that fact. The American people know that all the progress we've made in the past 75 years has happened behind the shield of NATO. And the American people understand what would happen if there was no NATO. Another war in Europe, American troops fighting and dying, dictators spreading chaos, economic collapse, catastrophes. Americans, they know we're stronger with our friends. And we understand this is a sacred obligation. As President Reagan put it, and I quote, "If our fellow democracies are not secure, we cannot be secure. If you are threatened, we are threatened. If you're not at peace, we cannot be at peace." Reagan knew it then, and we know it now. Our nations will continue to keep faith with what we pledged in years to come.
Now let's go to the vice president. Here is Kamala Harris. She was in Las Vegas yesterday to launch AAN HPI voters for Biden-Harris. That is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander communities. Here she is yesterday, sounding fired up as usual.
The former president consistently incites hate, including toward the AANHPI community. I will not repeat his words. I will not repeat his words because they should never be repeated. But I will say that someone who vilifies immigrants, who promotes xenophobia, someone who stokes hate, should never again have the chance to stand behind a microphone and the seal of the President of the United States.
All right, there she is, the Vice President Kamala Harris in Vegas yesterday. Now let's head over to Capitol Hill, where somebody finally mentioned this reporting that has just come out that has Trump's name all over the Epstein logs. It's Congressman Ted Lieu yesterday at a Democratic press conference.
So like Chairman Aguilar said, we hear a lot from our constituents on different issues, but something I've heard that doesn't seem to be being covered are the Epstein files. These files were released, and like Donald Trump's sort of all over this, right? There are pictures of him with Jeffrey Epstein. He's taken multiple plane flights with Epstein with young girls on board. He is on call logs with Epstein. One of the highest trending hashtags on Twitter right now is about Trump and Epstein. I'm not going to repeat the hashtag because we're in a dignified setting. But yeah, y'all might want to look at that because that's highly disturbing. And again, it shows that Donald Trump is unfit for office. And by the way, he was convicted in a civilian court for sexual assault, convicted in a separate court of 34 felonies. Donald Trump should drop out of the race.
All right, Ted Lieu yesterday. Now, here is MSNBC's Katie Fang introducing a montage. These are all Democratic congressmen, elected leaders in Washington. Whether they're with Biden or not, they overwhelmingly are.
Urging that Democrats are riding with Biden as party leaders shore up support for their presumptive nominee. NBC News reports that only a handful of House Democrats raised concerns about Biden's age and ability to win at the meeting, which was described as a listening session. And while most Democrats are backing Biden, the infighting that has spilled into public view shows that the party still has some work to do to achieve unity.
As the Democratic candidate, Joe Biden has my support.
As I've said before, I'm with Joe.
He just has to step down because he can't win, and my colleagues need to recognize that.
We're riding with Biden.
Joe Biden is our nominee. He is not leaving this race. He is in this race, and I support him.
I think he should step aside.
He had a bad debate. Former President Trump had a horrific presidency.
Are you all on the same page?
No, they're not even in the same book.
All right, that's Congressman Steve Cohen there at the very end. Well, we'll see. I think that I'm predicting that President Biden is still going to step down over the next week or so. I don't want him to. I don't think he should. I hope he doesn't in many ways, but I'm worried about the polls and the pressure. And I don't know. After yesterday, it's like one day at a time. At the end of every day, we're sitting here going, oh, he had a good day. He didn't have any too many slip-ups. Can he do that for all the way up to the convention? That'd be great if he could. That's what I'd like to see at least. But we don't know. We will know soon. All right. Day by day, hours at a time. Now, let me just switch subjects because Republicans on Capitol Hill, congressional Republicans in the House, apparently they think the most important issue in America right now is blocking energy efficient standards for refrigerators and dishwashers. Of course, this has become basically like a culture war issue that you're somehow a weak person if you like energy efficiency. Yesterday, it was argued on the House floor, and I'm going to play three clips I've got for you. First, here's a Republican. I don't know this jackass's name, but he is trying to convince people that, well, here he is.
But I do load and unload the dishwasher. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that many times I have opened the dishwasher, loaded properly with the right amount of dishwashing liquid or pod put in, that all the dishes aren't clean. Rinsed off before they were put in to the gentlelady and had to run it again. And Americans know this.
All right. That guy's name is Jeff Duncan. He's a real jackass and gets very badly embarrassed right here. This went viral yesterday. This is Congresswoman Katie Porter, who you don't want to mess with. And she asked if he would yield. He did, but I think it was a mistake.
I would like to yield. Are you willing to engage in this? Representative Duncan, I'd like to know if you know what the average utility cost is a month to run a dishwasher. Nope, he doesn't know. $2 to $4 a month. In other words, about a third of a Frappuccino. $2 to $4 a month. Mr. Duncan, do you know about how much a dishwasher costs, Representative Duncan? Like a mid-range dishwasher? Nope, he doesn't know. About 800, 900. You want to get fancier, like 1,000? Representative Duncan, do you know the best ways, the most important things you can do to make your dishwasher get the dishes clean? No, not a dishwasher expert. Loading it correctly. Mr. Chair, do you know how long it takes to load a what the most important technique is to load a dishwasher correctly? It is loading it correctly. Well, I'm asking. Because what I haven't heard, I've heard a lot about the Biden border, the so-called border crisis. What I haven't heard about is anything about dishwashers. So as somebody who saved and scrimped and was so proud to get a new dishwasher and can tell you a lot about them, what they cost, what kinds of features they have, how to load it properly, which I wish every person, every man and child in America would listen to their wife.
Gentlewoman, another 2 minutes.
Would listen to their spouse about how to load the dishwasher correctly. Those are the most important things that make your dishes get clean. This bill is ridiculous. It is Congress at its worst. A bunch of people who haven't unloaded a dishwasher ever, telling the American people what legislation, what kind of dishwashers they should or should not be able to buy. On behalf of every American woman who's going to load and unload tonight and again tomorrow morning, I yield back.
Oh, so good. Dishwashers are nice. There you go. Get the good ones. Load it right. Know what you're doing. Stop being a sexist prick. And now let's go. There's another one. This is Congresswoman Stansberry from New Mexico, I believe. Melanie Stansberry. She's really impressive as well with what she has to say.
I rise today in opposition not only to this rule, but the bills that it advances. And I have to say that I am amazed daily by the debates that I hear in this chamber and in our committees, and outraged that the GOP is using the floor to advance a hateful agenda, to take away voting rights, and to advance insane legislation. Because 1 week after we celebrated this great nation's independence, we are here today as they're putting forward legislation to protect our kitchen appliances. That's right, folks. Running bills on the floor entitled The Freedom of Refrigerators and Dignity for Dishwashers. I'm not making this up. These are the real names of the bills that they're running this week. Because apparently they're more concerned about the freedom of our refrigerator than the freedom to make decisions about our own bodies. They're more concerned about our dishwashers than they are about democracy. And they're more concerned about appliances than an autocrat who is seeking re-election, who says he wants to be a dictator on day one. So I ask my colleagues, honestly, how do you do this with a straight face? Because y'all, this ain't normal. This is insane. Is this the freedom and democracy that our country fought for? Arguing for kitchen appliances? Is this what your constituents are telling you? Because mine are telling me that they're terrified about the future of this country and about their families and their rights. They're asking us to fight to protect LGBTQ rights and abortion, to address climate change, to lower costs, to protect voting rights. And you're over here asking us to vote on a bill to protect the rights of dishwashers and refrigerators. It's insane. So I'm just like at a loss. It's time to wake up. It's time to get to work. It's time to serve the American people, because literally our democracy depends on it. And I yield back.
Yes, so good. Congresswoman Stansberry. I think I'm going to have to get her on the show as well. That was fantastic. And here is my old friend James McGovern, also on the House floor, ripping Republicans yesterday.
And if you want to talk about protecting elections, maybe my Republican friends ought to start telling the truth about the last election. And let me remind them that the leader of their party tried to submit fraudulent slates of electors to steal the last election. That's voter fraud, my friends. That's what voter fraud looks like. And my friends on the other side of the aisle said, not a thing. Not a thing. After court after court after court upheld the fact that we had a free and fair election. But the former president actually submitted fraudulent slates of electors to try to change the result of the last election.
And not to be outdone, here's Jasmine Crockett in a House Oversight Committee hearing yesterday.
They found him guilty not once, not twice, not 3 times, not 4, not 5, not 6. I could keep going on, but 34 counts were given. So the opinions of these people who were not juries is not what we do in this country. In this country, we have a system in which jurors decide who is found guilty. And if you have a problem with that, you go to the appellate court, which the last time I checked, he was raising money so that he could go to the appellate court and appeal his decision, and they will have the final say so. Thank you so much.
Yes, they will. The gentlelady yields back.
All right, Jim Jordan, thank you very much. And now here is Congressman Josh Hawley admitting that he is a Christian nationalist.
Some will say now that I am calling America a Christian nation. And so I am. And some will say that I am advocating Christian nationalism. And so I do.
All right, well, he's admitting it, and you gotta believe him when they are admitting it. And there's a lot to be said about that. I got a conversation with an expert on this, Sarah Posner, which I'll be posting, I think, for tomorrow's show. Really smart, really great, and she has lots to say about him and Mark Robinson, the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, who basically wants to kill liberals. I don't know if you heard that yesterday. And here's Stephen Colbert basically saying that President Biden should step aside. He joins Rob Reiner, Stephen King, Jon Stewart also skewered Biden on The Daily Show. And, well, what do you think?
The competing virtue here, there's another competing virtue, and that is self-sacrifice. And self-sacrifice takes a particular kind of courage. And that is a courage I believe Joe Biden is capable of. I believe he's a good enough man. He is a good enough president to put the needs of the country ahead of the needs of his ego. And however painful that might be, it is possible handing leadership to a younger generation is the right thing for the greater goodest. Or good as, either one.
Wow. That was I'm pretty surprised about that. I'll just say that. And here was an excerpt of Jon Stewart, who did like 15 minutes on it.
I am in no way saying Biden's got to drop out, but can't we stress test this candidacy? Can't we open up the conversation? Do you understand the opportunity here? Do you have any idea how thirsty Americans are for any hint of inspiration or leadership and a release from this choice of a megalomaniac and a suffocating gerontocracy? It is crushing our spirit. Do you have any idea what could be ahead of you? All we want is for someone to keep it 100. The percentage, not the age. That's all we want.
Wow, those guys seem to be on the same page, which is not always the case, but I'm surprised at that. By the way, I would listen to both those in their full context. Those are just clips, excerpts. They said plenty of really nice things about President Biden, of course. All right, well, there you go. Those are all the sound bites I've got for you, the headlines as well. Now it's time to get to today's guest, who is a big name. Very happy to get him back on the show. He's one of our all-time favorites. He, of course, is an investigative journalist, an author, a specialist in economics and tax issues. Is the winner of the 2001 Pulitzer Prize for beat reporting. He was at Reuters. He was at the New York Times. He has been a lecturer at Syracuse University, and now he's at the Rochester Institute of Technology. He just announced that he's taking a job there. He's written so many really good books, which I love and are very important, including Perfectly Legal, Free Lunch, The Fine Print, several books about Trump, who he covered and reported on for a long time. It's always a great conversation when it's with Cay Johnston. So check him out on social media, subscribe and support all his work. Everything's in the show links. Let's do it right now. Ladies and gentlemen, he is back. Cay Johnston, and he's got news. Like, he's still, you just won't quit. You just won't stop. You're now going to be a professor at RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, where you live there in Rochester. And my question to you is, aren't you the guy who's written all these books about finance and economics? Aren't you someone who plans for retirement or was told to plan for retirement? You're not retiring ever? What's the deal? Congratulations.
Well, I hope not to ever retire. My wife, who was the CEO of the Rochester Area Community Foundation for 30 years, when she retired, said 48 years, 8 kids, done. I enjoy teaching a great deal, and I'll be teaching law, as I did at Syracuse University College of Law, and I'll be teaching some journalism classes. And it's full-time and professor of practice, and I'm really thrilled, delighted to be doing this.
I feel like one of the classes you're teaching has something to do with teaching real-time news, how it's processed.
I'm going to teach the first semester starting in August. I'll teach the same law course I've taught for the last 5 years at Syracuse and to undergraduates. And then the other class I'm going to teach is essentially what is journalism? What's the theory and principle of it? It's not a news writing and reporting class. It's what is the theory and the principle of journalism. And I'm very big on theory and principle as opposed to mechanics.
Yeah, I've seen that, and I've read so much of your writing, and I wonder about how that changes when politics change, when government changes, when it loses its ability to regulate, say, an economy. Doesn't it change as people running it change, or doesn't it change as it gets reduced, cut?
I think principles are pretty eternal. They may evolve and expand as we get more knowledge. But, for example, right now we have a whole bunch of people, including Donald Trump, who want to get rid of the income tax and replace it with tariffs. Not only is that a terrible idea that any economist should be able to explain to you, but more importantly, the oldest surviving principle in Western civilization is progressive taxation. The Old Testament has lots of progressive taxation in it. And if you don't know that, I can just say to you, go read the works of Adam Chodorow, Chodorow, at the Arizona State University Law School in Phoenix. Ancient Athens, when it became a democracy, adopted progressive taxation. I call democracy and progressive taxation civil twins. And if you are opposed to progressive taxation, which because it's the oldest surviving principle is the most conservative principle, then you're not a conservative. You're a radical. You're a reactionary. You're an authoritarian. But you shouldn't be called by others a conservative. There's nothing conservative about opposing progressive taxation.
You just made me think of another really important economic idea. I wasn't planning on asking you about this, but we keep hearing about Project 2025, and we keep hearing about this idea, and have for years, that there would be, if Trump were to take back over, they would deport 20 million, however many million undocumented immigrants that they can find, that they can hunt down, whatever. What would that do to the economy? Because I keep saying that it would close every restaurant in New York City, and it would destroy all kinds of different industries, much less small businesses. But maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
You like to have milk for your kids? Forget about it. You like fresh fruit? Forget about it. You want to be able to eat raspberries in the winter? Not going to happen. Dairy, agriculture, slaughterhouses, everything connected to agriculture pretty much would be threatened by this. Restaurants would be threatened by it, janitorial services. And if you think that we could round up 11 or 12 million people and not do it in a way that results in American-born citizens being deported, you haven't thought through how sloppy this would be. Some of the children that Donald Trump's Minister of Hate, Steve Miller, had separated from their parents when they came across the border have yet to be reunited to the parents, because when they separated them, they didn't make any record of whose child was who.
Terrible.
Because, of course, that was never the intent, to return them together. And literally, they found a lot of them. The Biden administration has worked very hard to find and reunite children, but there's several hundred still who have not been reunited. So you want to tank the economy, adopt a tariff system that doubles the price of imports. Because when you have a tariff, Donald keeps saying China will pay. That's not what a tariff is. An increased price that you're going to pay as the consumer. And so we want to discourage Chinese cars. Okay, we put a higher tariff on them. But that means American manufacturers can raise their prices to $1 below the Chinese price and expand their market share. And if we were a developing economy, as China has been for the last 50 years, as we were up until about 1900, tariffs make sense. You're protecting your domestic industry. You're channeling extra profits into that industry, and you're sticking it to the consumers. But we're a mature economy. This is a self-destruction mode by someone, Donald, who I've known and covered for 36 years, and he doesn't know anything. He didn't know why there's a memorial on top of the USS Arizona in Pearl Harbor. If you don't know that, how could you possibly understand the economics of tariffs and how they're paid by the consumer, not by the Chinese government?
He doesn't play by the same set of rules when it comes to even doing business anyway, so it's not as if he needs to understand them. I wanted to ask you, of course, about the Supreme Court's decisions. I thought about you when they decided what's called the Chevron case, and thinking a lot about how much power now the executive branch has been given, which is certainly not something conservatives, I think, used to believe. That's a new idea, this executive power that they all are supporting. But what is this going to do to regulatory agencies? What is this going to do to the economy?
The Chevron decision, not the immunity decision. Okay.
Yeah.
The Chevron decision from 1982 said that courts should pay deference to regulators. At the Environmental Protection Agency and the Bureau of Economic Analysis and all these other federal administrative agencies, we as taxpayers have highly trained people. The government's full of people with doctoral degrees, master's degrees, deeply studied people who are not just CPAs at the IRS. They have LM graduate legal specialties. And because these people are the experts by definition, the court said when Congress writes a law that's ambiguous, and they're all ambiguous, the courts must pay deference to the administrative agencies that write the rules and regulations. And all of these rules are promulgated in something called the Federal Register, which I've used and DC Report, when I ran it, used regularly as a news source because other journalists don't look at it. And then people write in, or companies write in, or lawyers and lobbyists write in, we don't like this or that about the rule. They hold hearings and they eventually adopt a rule. And the Chevron decision says, nope, federal judges will now decide these matters. Federal judges, with some very limited exceptions, tax court, court of claims, and the major ones, they're generalists. You're a judge. Pete Dominick walks in one day with a copyright case, and David Cay Johnston comes in another day with a taking of my land case. And they're generalists. They're not deep experts in any one area, with relatively rare exceptions. And this is a full employment act for lawyers. It'll encourage lots more litigation.
Right.
It will mess up the economy. If you want to make an investment in something, okay, here are the rules set down by the EPA after a series of hearings, and there's been some litigation over it. Now we're going to go do what we're going to do. We know the rules. Oh, no more. What if the opponents go to court and they're going to say, forget what the EPA said the rules are? And then what judge did you get? Did you get a judge who, like, if he's a serious duck hunter, it involves a marsh? You might want to be on the side of the ducks in that case. And you get another one where, it's a judge who loves polluters, has a lot of his money put into Exxon and Koch brothers shares. You might not want to be the polluter in that, the anti-polluter in that case. Right. So this is a terrible decision, especially because of the principle that every single Supreme Court justice said they would honor, which is called stare decisis, which means in Latin, it's a settled matter. A lot of the law is an arbitrary line between here and there, but that's been the law for 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years in British common law. And once everybody knows the rule, they shape their lives around it. To blow that up, terrible thing to do, except for the employment of lawyers who litigate such matters.
Yeah, I don't care about the employment of lawyers. You've written books that basically are for the public's interest. Government is for the public's interest. It's there to sensibly protect public health and provide public education. It would seem the Supreme Court made it a lot harder for the government to do those things and to do more likely what's in the interest of the private sector, who is helping get these judges in office, much less those in Congress.
So at the core of this, Pete, is a term that has invaded our society since Ronald Reagan, or maybe the late Jimmy Carter era. Deregulation. There is no such thing as deregulation. There's only new regulation. And the experience we've had for the last almost 50 years is that the new regulations favor business, favor the rich, and work against ordinary people. They work against public health. They work against environmental protection. They work against workers being guaranteed that they get their wages paid. And we need to stop talking about deregulation. We need to talk about re-regulation and pro-powerful people regulation.
When you think about the financial deregulation, it almost should be the one I keep thinking about EPA and other agencies and what they will or will not be able to do moving forward potentially. But it was the financial industry that rewrote the banking rules that allowed 2008 to happen, which you covered intensively at the time and after. The banks alone could run away with it.
When we had the savings and loan crisis in the late 80s and early 90s, a single nobody bureaucrat lawyer named Bill Black figured out how crooks had taken over a bunch of savings and loans and were lining their pockets. And he taught the FBI and prosecutors how to go after these people. There were more than 3,000 indictments in the S&L scandals and more than 800 high-level bankers, CEOs, chief tax officers, chief operating officers who went to prison because of Bill Black. And Bill Black's reward for this was that he was relegated to becoming an associate professor at a minor law school in Missouri. Nobody wants to touch or see Bill Black. Bill went and got a doctoral degree in criminology, and he wrote a wonderful book on the new theory he developed called control fraud. we think of businesses as the people at the top of the business are running it for the welfare of the owners, the shareholders. They might take a little more money for themselves and make things convenient for themselves. But on the whole, they're working for the shareholders. And Bill showed that, no, if you're in control, you can run the whole business as a fraud and enrich yourself and clean the pockets of the shareholders. And he wrote a book called The Best Way to Rob a Bank is to Own One.
Yeah.
When we got to the George W. Bush administration, the beginning of this century, they basically stopped the requirement that you underwrite a loan. You go and apply for a mortgage. It used to be you had to fill out all sorts of paperwork and prove you were employed, and some banks would require letters of recommendation before they'd give you a mortgage. You had to put 20% down. They threw all that out, and so they were making what were called openly liar's loans.
Right.
People would say, oh, my income's $1 million a year, and I can afford to buy this mansion. And they were all part of a scheme to collect the fees for the loans so that the bankers at the top, the controlling interests, got rich. It sank the economy. And Barack Obama made a decision not to prosecute these people. They wanted the economy to recover. So they left the crooks in charge. And today, the too big to fail banks, a phrase we don't use anymore, those banks have a larger share of the banking business, a much larger share than they did in 2007.
I used to interview Bill Black. I interviewed him several times.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
I think he's at the University of Minnesota now. I probably should.
His wife is at the University of Minnesota. She's a vice dean, and she is the author with two other women of a really good new book called Fair Shake, in which they document June Carbone, his wife, and Naomi Kahn. They document from the files of the gender discrimination lawsuit against Walmart, how Walmart makes sure that men are promoted and women are not. And it's brilliant because it shows these subtle rules that are in place that discriminate against women, especially mothers, and make sure that men get promoted and women are held back.
June Carbone, Naomi Kahn, the Fair Shake, to build a just economy, and Nancy Levitt. There's a third name on the.
She's on that book, and they wrote wrote two previous books. One was called Red Families, Blue Families, which showed that the most stable marriages take place in the blue states, and the least stable take place in the red states. Highest divorce rates and stuff are in places like Alabama, and they're not in Massachusetts. And then they wrote a book called Marriage Markets. And one of the things Marriage Markets showed is used to be doctors would marry nurses, right? Lawyers would marry paralegals. Not anymore. Surgeons marry surgeons. Lawyers marry lawyers. And partners in law firms marry partners in law firms, which means that the upward mobility track for some women has been reduced and the income concentration is much greater. Because you have two professionals. I think that next, when we get the tax data for 2024 and certainly no later than 2026, America will have more than 1 million households with $1 million of annual income. Right now, we're at about 860,000 for the year 2022.
Jesus, I want to dig into all of those. I was going through your latest tweets and didn't realize that you've always been advocating for adding justices to the Supreme Court. Make the case.
There are 15 subordinate courts that require supervision by the U.S. Supreme Court. So some of the justices are doubled up. Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, in his annual reports, complains there aren't enough federal judges. And I've written a number of columns and articles about really important cases in very complex areas like regulation. We were talking about the Chevron decision, where federal judges have simply found a way to get rid of the case rather than hearing it. People in New England got ripped off for about $3 billion by Wall Street and manipulating the electricity markets up there. And the judge just wouldn't do anything about it because he's overloaded. So I've advocated for a long time, we need to have several hundred more district court judges, trial court judges, probably 100 more appeals court judges. And I think the Supreme Court we shouldn't increase it by 2 or something like that. Donald Trump says we should increase it to 12. We should increase it, I think, to 13, 15, or 17. And I think the optimal number is 15. And I also think that a president, especially if Joe Biden were to get this and have another term, you appoint young people less than 50. You appoint people who have a solid scholarly track record of not being ideological. That you can establish that by studying their published law review essays and speeches. And you get a diversity of backgrounds. Right now, the Supreme Court is heavily Catholic and heavily Harvard. There are plenty of serious, respected scholars who went to state law schools in the Midwest, went to state law schools here in New York State or in Ohio or Oregon. And we should have some of those people, and we should have people who are Jewish, Protestant, Muslim, atheists. All of those should be represented on the court.
Even an atheist, really?
Sure, why not?
I just have to ask you before I let you go, and I'm always so happy to talk to you, sir, what your thoughts are on the state of the race with about 119 days to go. Before the election, you've got about 40 days before the Democratic convention. I've seen your tweets. It seems like you're obviously in full support of President Biden. I think we all are. But what do you make about the conversation? And the bottom line is the polls could continue to crater. It would seem that most of his supporters are staying with him. But a lot of pundits, a lot of analysts, and a lot of people that are close to him and have been with him have written him off or asked him to step down. What are your thoughts on the conversation about where we go in these next few days? Because my one take that I agree with is things are probably just going to get worse for him with each appearance. One mess up, one slip up, one wrong thing, and they're going to jump all over him, and support might continue to crater is what I worry about. What do you think?
So first and foremost, if Joe Biden steps back, even if Kamala Harris is going to be the nominee, first of all, that means that it's a wide open convention. All the delegates are released. You could have a complete mess at the Democratic National Convention.
Don't want that.
Secondly, if you think that the Republicans won't try in every state they can to say, oh, you can't have Kamala Harris on the ballot, she's disqualified, and only Donald Trump will appear on the ballot. If you trust the Supreme Court to uphold, I have no reason to trust this Supreme Court. It's very ideological. So that's a very practical consideration. And you know what? We have a system. Let's assume that Joe Biden deteriorated mentally enough that he can't do the job. We have a 27th Amendment to remove him from office if needed. He can resign. Then we have a vice president who steps forward. That's how Teddy Roosevelt became president. McKinley was assassinated in Buffalo. The system of having a vice president has served us well. So I think we should stick with those principles. In addition to that, Donald Trump, and you probably have collected some of these, you can certainly show your audience, he's going along talking like I am at one of his rallies, and suddenly, why is this not front page news in my former newspaper, the New York Times? Why have there been 192 articles in the last week or so about or mentioning Biden's issues and not a single article about, some mentions, but no articles focused on? Donald Trump lied all the way through the debate. He never answered any of the questions that were asked, and he blatantly lied. The way to counter Trump is not to do what Biden tried to do, and his comms staff, his communications people, clearly, Pete, told him to do. You don't go back and try and fight Donald Trump with specifics. My budget deficit is only half of yours, because that doesn't work. The way you get Donald is, first and foremost, you make fun of him, because Donald cannot cope with anyone mocking him. He is a child, and he's very insecure. And that's what happened when Barack Obama said to him on the very night that he was working on Osama bin Laden and the raid in Pakistan.
I was there. I was in the room. That's right.
Right. And he says, the momentous decisions Donald has to make. Should I fire Meatloaf? And everyone in the room is laughing except Donald, who's scowling because he can't stand to have anyone make fun of him, because he's a hollow person. So first of all, he should have been making fun of him. Secondly, you hit him with big issues. So you just hit him with, tell us about your borrowing all that money to give your rich friends tax cuts. Didn't pay for itself. You said it would. That's about as far in policy as you want to get. You want to bring up Dobbs, and the Democrats need to be Dobbs. Women, the government is going to control your sex life. Project 2025 proposes monitoring the menstrual cycles of women. How Stalinist can you get? And finally, Joe is actually in very good physical shape. I don't know if you've seen the videos of him. He rides his bike faster than I do. We're almost the same age. I'm 75. He's 80. Donald, by the way, is 78. Let's not forget that. He does push-ups with schoolgirls. So I wish he had done a Jack Palance. At the 1992 Oscars, the actor Jack Palance, who was in his 70s, fell to the floor and did one-arm push-ups. And if I were Joe's comms advisor, I'd say, Joe, I want you to right now practice this. You're going to fall to the floor. You're going to do one-arm push-ups with your right arm. You're going to flip over and do them with your left arm. Then you're going to get up and say, come on, Donald, come on, show us you can do it. Hey, you know what? You can use both arms.
Some kind of
Donald, and you show what a fraud he is. Yeah. And then he should have said things like, you know, you're the only president in 90 years who left office with fewer jobs when he came in. I created more jobs in 3 years than every Republican president since World War II.
I love talking to you. I wish you were consulting the president, and I'm glad that you are here consulting us with all of your continued knowledge. Always an American treasure, sir. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
I'm sure, Pete, and I wish I could tell jokes like you, but we all have different skills.
Hey, listen, can't all have everything, can we? Thank you, sir.
Take care.
Yeah, David Cay Johnston, everybody. Go support everything he's doing. Follow him on Twitter. Let him know that you heard him here on the show, especially over on Twitter. That's still a thing, and it's still helpful, and I'm glad for that. That is all I've got for you today. I'll be back tomorrow, and we'll hang out tomorrow night. I should have Sarah Posner joining me. I've got Ruth Whitman joining me about her new book about boys, and much more coming your way. Thank you for sticking with me, supporting me. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. Tell your friends. John Carroll, take it away.
That's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you gotta stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up, that's right. You got to rise up, you got to stand up, you got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. Point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right. We got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up. Stand up. Got to stand up. Ooh, come on, just stand up. Everybody got to stand up in the dark.